Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Office Bloke Daz.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Two of us here today.
Yay.
Max is missing today. He's off. His day off.
Yeah.
Why no one talks about Africa's most successful country?
Ooh. I wonder what that is then.
My guess would be Nigeria.
I was going to say Nigeria. It's one of the biggest ones and sort of
It's
like...
oil rich, very oil rich.
Yeah.
Quite a wealthy country. I don't think the money cascades down like it should do.
Yeah.
From the super rich to the super poor. There's a massive gap.
Yeah.
But again with Nigerians, I've never really come across a bad Nigerian.
Yeah.
They're always very happy and bubbly and like very outgoing and very
very
chatty,
happy and stuff like that. Yeah.
Always got $1 million to send you. You just got to send them some money first.
Yeah.
All princes.
Yeah.
Not great people. They really are. I don't know where this could be. Let's see.
Africa is a diverse continent, but the success rate of its various countries is mixed, to say the least. But there is one country that stands apart. One that
Mauritius.
has a high GDP, a comfortable population, and a stable democracy and economy. But I seriously doubt you've ever heard of it. This is Mauritius, a tiny island country that bucks the trend of Africa as a whole. So why is Mauritius so successful, and why have you probably never heard of it? To start, we need to take a look at the island itself, because it is quite unlike anything you've ever seen.
I don't know which audience is sort of like asking whether you heard of it. I thought most people would have heard of Mauritius.
So would I.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known about it for years and years and years.
It's a huge vacation holiday spot.
Yeah, it's
for Europeans, I would say, for people from around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a huge holiday spot.
It's French speaking, I think, isn't it?
Mauritius, yeah, it is. It's I think it's a big wedding venue, like a honeymoon destination.
Yeah, that's right. I always thought it's like a French, sort of like a French island, actually.
No,
but
it's
obviously it's African. But yeah, I always thought it's French anyway.
Can't remember the capital. I'm trying to think of the capital. So, is it Mali?
It is
Male, Mali?
No.
Port Louis? St. Louis?
Yeah, Port Louis, I think
Port
it
Louis?
is. Yeah, Port Louis. Yeah.
I always get mixed up.
Mark
between
Twain once
Maldives.
wrote, "You gather the idea that Mauritius was made first, and then heaven, and that heaven was copied after Mauritius." It's a bold claim, but for anyone who has seen its shores, it feels less like hyperbole and more like a statement of fact. Located over 1,000 miles off the southeastern coast of Africa is Mauritius, a tiny dot in the vast Indian Ocean, a place often overlooked on world maps. And to truly understand its story, we must first understand the island itself, a dramatic stage of volcanic fury and serene beauty upon which an incredible country would emerge. Seen from above, Mauritius is a spectacle, a central plateau of jagged, emerald green mountains that gives way to plains that slope gently towards a coastline of brilliant white sand. But unlike most landmasses on Earth, Mauritius wasn't born of slow, grinding geology. It was forged by violent fire. You see, Mauritius is a volcanic island, punched up from the seabed millions of years ago by dramatic eruptions. These origins are etched into its very skyline. The dramatic peaks of Le Morne-Brabant, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the curiously shaped Trois Mamelles Mountains are not ancient, eroded nubs. They're the dramatic, fractured remnants of a massive shield volcano. But here's where the island's story takes a fascinating turn. This violent beginning would ultimately create the conditions for unparalleled tranquility. Surrounding nearly the entire island is a barrier of coral reef, a delicate living fortress that guards the country's coastline. This reef is the island's great protector. It absorbs the raw power of the Indian Ocean, transforming crashing waves into gentle, lapping waters. And it's this exact process that created the iconic Mauritian lagoons. Vast stretches of calm, impossibly turquoise water, so clear you can see the sandy floor from dozens of feet above. It's really a world of two oceans.
Yeah,
the wild, deep blue sea beyond the reef and the serene, shallow paradise within it. This natural wall didn't just create postcard-perfect beaches. It would fundamentally shape how life, both marine and human, could thrive here. But the most breathtaking feature of the Mauritian coast isn't the reef itself, but a powerful illusion it helps create. Off the southwestern tip of the island, below the towering peak of Le Morne, lies one of the planet's most stunning natural phenomena, an underwater waterfall. From the air, it appears as though a massive river is plunging into a deep underwater abyss. The sight is both baffling and mesmerizing. You can see the water cascading into the depths, a torrent of blue and white pouring into the darkness. But here's where it gets a little weird. The waterfall isn't real. It's a spectacular optical illusion, a trick of geography and perception. The water is actually sand and silt deposits being pulled by ocean currents off the high coastal shelf and down into the much deeper ocean beyond. It's a river of sand, creating a three-dimensional painting that just appears like what we interpret as a waterfall. For millions of years, this isolated landscape evolved in isolation. Its distance from the continent meant that only the hardiest plants and animals could arrive, leading to the evolution of unique species, most famously, the dodo bird. It was a world untouched by humanity, a pristine volcanic jewelry box, fertile and vibrant, but utterly alone. It had no indigenous population, no ancient ruins, no human footprint whatsoever. The stage was set, a perfect, empty paradise waiting in the middle of the ocean. That was all about to change. The arrival of the first ships would trigger a chain of events that would strip the island of its native forests, drive its unique creatures to extinction, and begin a new story, one of colonization, sugar, and the forging of a new people. Basically, this empty paradise wouldn't stay empty for long. Mauritius is a really incredible part of the world, but there are other places in the world that are just as amazing, like where I'm at right now, Morocco. And that's precisely why I've decided to dedicate this week's sponsor to my travel channel, Geolex. Over the past year, I've been to some really amazing places. You won't be disappointed. Now let's get back to Mauritius and find out how the island was colonized in the first place. For millions of years, Mauritius was devoid of human life. While civilizations rose and fell across the globe, Mauritius was empty. It was a world without people, a biological experiment running in perfect isolation. But such a paradise, fertile and strategically placed, wouldn't remain hidden forever. The story of how this island was populated is not one of ancient migrations, but a modern, often brutal, tale of commerce, colonization, and the forced and voluntary movement of people from 3 different continents. The result was a country with no native population, a place where everyone, in a sense, is an immigrant. But let's clear one thing up. Mauritius wasn't entirely unknown to humans. In fact, for centuries, Arab and Malay sailors knew of the island. It was a landmark on their trade routes, but they never settled it. The Portuguese also charted it in the early 1500s and named it Island of the Swan, likely after the dodo, but they too moved on. The first real attempt to tame this island came in 1598 from the Dutch. They renamed it Mauritius in honor of their prince, Maurice van Nassau, and set up a small colony. It was also the Dutch who introduced sugarcane, the very crop that would one day define the island's destiny. But their tenure on the island was a disaster. They were plagued by cyclones, droughts, and rat infestations. And within a few decades, they had driven the dodo to extinction. By 1710, the Dutch abandoned the island completely, leaving behind little more than a name and fields of sugarcane. The game changer for Mauritius came 5 years later. In 1715, France claimed the abandoned island, renaming it Ile-de-France. This was the true beginning of modern Mauritius. Under the ambitious governor Bertrand François Mahe de la Bourdonnais, the island was transformed. He established Port Louis as a bustling naval base and a key stop on the route to India. More importantly, he massively expanded sugarcane cultivation. This agricultural boom, however, was built on a foundation of human suffering. To work the vast plantations, the French brought in thousands of enslaved peoples from East Africa and Madagascar. This brutal system forged the island's first permanent population and created the Afro-Mauritian Creole community. The island was no longer empty. It was a productive, but deeply unequal and brutal colonial enterprise. But here's where its fate would be twisted by global events once more. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British saw French-held Mauritius as a dagger pointed at their vital trade routes to India. In 1810, they launched a successful invasion and seized control. Yet the British takeover was unlike most others. In the Treaty of Capitulation, they made a remarkable promise. They would preserve the islanders' property, laws, language, and religion. This single decision is why, to this day, Mauritius feels more French than British. French remains a common language, the legal system is based on the Napoleonic Code, and the island's oldest families trace their lineage back to French colonists. The British won the battle, but the French had won the cultural war. The British, however, completely changed the island's demographic destiny. In 1835, the British Empire abolished slavery. For the sugar barons of Mauritius, this was a catastrophe. Their entire economic model collapsed overnight. Desperate for a new source of cheap, reliable labor, they turned to the British Empire's largest and most populous territory, India. They devised a system of indentured servitude, where workers signed contracts to labor on the plantations for a set number of years in exchange for passage and a meager wage. It became known as the Great Experiment, and Mauritius was its first and largest testing ground. Between 1834 and the early 1900s, nearly 500,000 Indian laborers were brought to the island. While many intended to return, most stayed, forever altering the island's cultural and ethnic makeup. This wave of migration created the Indo-Mauritian majority and laid the groundwork for one of the most multicultural societies on Earth. By the turn of the 1900s, this tiny island was home to people of European, African, and Asian descent, all living in complex colonial hierarchy. As the century progressed, a quiet but steady movement for self-rule began to grow, led by figures like Sir Siwusagur Ramgoolam. Finally, on March 12, 1968, Mauritius gained its independence, but its future was far from certain. International observers looked at the new independent country, overpopulated, reliant on a single crop, and simmering with ethnic tensions, and predicted it would become a failed state. Its improbable mix of peoples seemed like a recipe for conflict, not cooperation. They were all about to be proven wrong. When Mauritius gained its independence in 1968, it was a small, overpopulated island with no natural resources to speak of, entirely dependent on the volatile price of a single crop, sugar. In 1970, Mauritius was home to nearly 830,000 people, which might not sound like much, but Mauritius is very small. In fact, at just a bit over 2,000 square kilometers, Mauritius is roughly half the size of Rhode Island, the smallest state in the United States. It was so small, crowded, and economically dependent that Nobel Prize-winning economist James Meade took one look at the island's prospects and declared its future bleak. Many predicted it would become a classic failed state, torn apart by poverty and ethnic division. And yet, today, Mauritius has one of the highest GDP per capita rates in Africa, a stable democracy, and a thriving, complex economy. It stands alongside countries like Botswana, blessed with diamonds, and Seychelles, a high-end tourism haven with 1/12 of the population, as one of the continent's great success stories. But the Mauritian path was different than either. It had no diamonds, and its success was about so much more than tourism. Its story is a masterclass in economic vision and social ingenuity. It's the story of the Mauritian miracle. So, how did they pull it off? The first step for Mauritius was to break the shackles of sugar. While other newly independent countries in Africa were nationalizing industries, Mauritius did the opposite. In the 1970s, the government established export processing zones, offering tax incentives and a stable environment to attract foreign companies, primarily in textile manufacturing. This was a radical idea at the time, but it worked. Hong Kong textile magnates arrived, factories were built, and tens of thousands of jobs were created, particularly for women, empowering a brand new generation. This single move diversified the economy away from agriculture and provided the crucial first rung on the economic ladder. But here's where it gets really interesting. Mauritius knew the textile boom wouldn't last forever. As the world changed and manufacturing became cheaper elsewhere, Mauritian leaders were already planning their next move. This is what sets the country apart, an incredible capacity for long-term strategic planning. They looked at their assets: a bilingual population fluent in English and French, a strategic time zone between Asia and Europe, and political stability. The answer was to pivot from manufacturing to services. They cultivated a sophisticated offshore banking and financial services sector, becoming a trusted hub for international investment. At the same time, they developed an upscale tourism market, focusing on luxury over mass travel to preserve the island's pristine environment. They went from an economy based on sugarcane to one based on cotton shirts to one based on financial data and five-star resorts. But here's the real secret to their success. Economic plans are meaningless without a stable society to build them on. This was Mauritius's greatest test. With its mix of Indian, African, Chinese, and European descendants, the island was a powder keg of potential ethnic conflict, something we've seen constantly around the world. But instead of suppressing this diversity, the country's founders enshrined it in their political system. They built a parliamentary democracy that guaranteed representation for all minority groups. They fostered a national identity, Mauritian first, while celebrating the distinct cultures of each community. Mosques, temples, and churches share the same streets. This social contract, an agreement to live and work together, became the bedrock of their stability. Without this remarkable social cohesion, none of the economic progress would have been possible. So if Mauritius is such a triumph, why does it remain the most successful African country you've never heard of? The answer lies on the map. The island is a tiny dot of just 2,000 square kilometers, located 1,800 kilometers from the African mainland.
Off the,
it's geographically
mainland.
and culturally an outlier. Its population of around 1.3 million people is centered in its capital, Port Louis, but its small scale means it rarely makes global headlines. Its success is quiet, a story of steady growth and peaceful elections, not the dramatic conflicts that capture the world's attention. So the Mauritian miracle wasn't a miracle at all. It was a result of deliberate choices to diversify, invest in its people, embrace democracy, and most importantly, turn a perceived weakness, its diversity, into its greatest strength. This week, I'm off to the highlands of Armenia to see more ancient monasteries and hike into the incredible Lesser Caucasus Mountains. And you should come join me over on my travel channel. I hope you enjoyed learning all about Mauritius.
Yeah, interesting. I know a guy from Mauritius, and I always say to him when I see him, I always go, "You gave up Mauritius for this?" Goes in the pub here, goes in the railway. Yeah. He's you can never. When I looked at him, I always thought he was Indian. He looks Indian.
Yeah, well, I always thought he was French and just French. I didn't realise the British had gone in there and taken over, to be honest. I knew they spoke a lot. There's a big French-speaking population, but I thought it was still like a French island.
I'm sure the Mauritians compete in the Commonwealth Games, which is kind of like a... which is... That's that. When I'm watching the Commonwealth Games, I always think to myself, that used to be a part of the British Empire?
Yeah,
sort of things,
of course.
Like, and that's always sort of like... comes back to me.
That's
right.
Things like that. But obviously they're independent now, so whether they still would or not, I'm not sure how it works when it comes to Commonwealth Games. Do they? Right.
Yeah, no one's under our rules still.
No.
It's but we still Canada.
No, sometimes some countries don't have the Queen or King as head of state, do they?
No,
that's what I mean. When they don't, then I wouldn't have thought they would.
I think one recently,
but like Australia do
Jamaica
still,
or
like
Jamaica
that,
or Bermuda or somewhere like that. Bahamas, one of them sort of like Caribbean countries where they were sort of like, didn't they recently change that? But I think they still compete at the Commonwealth Games.
Right, okay. It's interesting on that because that's how I thought that worked. But could be wrong on that.
Yeah, but it's the guy I know. Like I say, I always thought he was Indian. Then one day he said something about being from Seychelles, from Mauritius.
Yeah,
and I went, "You from Mauritius?" He's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Never knew that. I thought you were Indian."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." He said, "There's a lot of Indian-looking people down there."
Yeah, obviously there is, isn't there? Yeah.
He says, but he said you can't really tell someone from Mauritius. You wouldn't be able to pick someone out. And so I say he looks Mauritian.
Right. Okay.
He said because it's like a melting pot of what we are.
Well, it was. I mean, by the sound of it, and there was no sort of indigenous population, so I guess you wouldn't be able to tell. It would be difficult to pick out someone that's actually from there. So,
but like I always say, give that up to come here.
Yeah,
well
it looks
done, mate.
pretty
Well
ideal.
done.
Some of the beaches and the seas and that looks absolutely amazing.
It is a massive vacation resort for especially for Europeans, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
God knows, I've never been, so it's a little bit too far out for me to go.
Decent weather down there as well, isn't it? Where it is time zone, time change isn't too bad. It's probably like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah,
so
something like that. Yeah, but it's definitely one. You got a few places down that way. Like I said, they mentioned the Seychelles as well.
Seychelles, yeah, of course, that's not too far away from there, is it? But it's a nice part of the world. But it's interesting finding out about these places, isn't it? How they start up and how they develop.
Especially it comes under Africa as well, because it is quite far out from Africa. I guess it's got to sort of fall into some kind of a.
Yeah, it's a long way off the coastline still, isn't it? But yes, I guess that's like the nearest continent. So it'd be classed as. It's
kind of like in between there and India, isn't it?
Yeah.
Looks like a little bit sort of like, I don't know how far the trek was down to India there.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I'm guessing it's further. Yeah. Otherwise, it might be classed as sort of like Asian. But I guess that's how they do it anyway. They put it on like the nearest continent.
Who knows? Who knows nowadays?
Yeah.
Wherever you land nowadays, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.